Can you believe it's almost been 1 year now since the Switch 2 came out? I know, right? Crazy how time flies. Nintendo as a company has existed for the better part of 130 years now and has been making successful video games for the better part of 40 years now. As a result, it's a company whose games have been a part of multiple generations of people for quite some time now. And multiple different kinds of people from various walks of life have their own sentimental Nintendo experience that they grew up with. It does seem to be a common thing with Nintendo fans overall, having played and loved the games as a kid and still continuing to play and love the games today. However, in the year of our Lord 2026, one particular thing seems very uncommon and also very unnuanced when it comes to Nintendo currently. And of course, that's none other than online criticism of the company itself. Online discussion and discourse surrounding Nintendo has existed almost as long as online discussion of media overall has been a thing. But in recent memory, I think we've seen a very clear and also a very telling divide between the kinds of Nintendo criticism that is currently available out there. Rather than there being a plethora of fair or nuanced criticism about Nintendo and both the bad and the good surrounding the company, it seems in recent memory, Nintendo criticism has essentially dissolved into two big extremes, that being the Nintendo shills and the Nintendo grifters. And unfortunately, there is almost no in-between whatsoever when it comes to criticism of Nintendo. I think criticism of Nintendo in the modern age has definitely hit a major low point, since instead of there being a plethora of fair, nuanced criticism about Nintendo in online spaces, you pretty much only have two different opposite ends of an extreme spectrum. You have Camp 1, aka the shills, who act like everything Nintendo does in the modern age is all good and there are no problems whatsoever, which obviously is wrong. But on the other end of that, you have Camp 2, the grifters, who pretty much consistently put out hate content of Nintendo, sometimes daily in some cases, and come off more like they're just trying to generate hate and negativity about Nintendo just for the sake of it, rather than actually criticizing the company in any real fashion. So today, I want to look at both Nintendo grifters and shills, talk about why exactly neither of them provide any kind of real criticism of Nintendo, and also just talk about what real criticism of Nintendo in the modern age should look like in general. First, let's go over the topic of the idea of Nintendo shills, since I think that is currently the camp that is losing influence for reasons we'll get into shortly, but also they are still definitely worth discussing since they do muddle the pot quite a bit on real Nintendo criticism. To explain the current state of what I consider the Nintendo shills on YouTube, we actually need to go back to last year in June when the Switch 2 originally launched. When the Switch 2's price tag was officially unveiled, that being $450 for the console-only package and $500 for the Mario Kart World bundle, a lot of gamers and people on YouTube in general took note of how big of a price jump this was from the Switch 1. Probably the most notable person on YouTube, specifically in terms of Nintendo YouTubers, to criticize Nintendo initially for their price tag on the Switch 2 was none other than our Australian Fabio wannabe, that being BeatEmups. In terms of channels that pretty much exclusively cover Nintendo, their hardware, their games, and their accessories, BeatEmups is probably the most popular one, having over 1.8 million subscribers. So as you can probably imagine, he has quite a bit of influence in terms of Nintendo discourse on the internet in general. Originally, when the Switch 2's prices were announced, BeatEmups did a video called "Why is the Switch 2 so expensive?" In this video, he talked about all the different accessories, the main console itself, and all the games in regards to the Switch 2 and discussed how he thought all of it was very expensive. Now, there are actually a lot of things I do agree with BeatEmups on here. I definitely think the tutorial type game that Nintendo made for the Switch 2 should not be a paid feature whatsoever. This really should have just been something that came prepackaged with the system, not something you had to pay extra for.
But there were definitely multiple moments where I kind of had to just look in the camera and wince and wonder what I was hearing.
Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour will launch as a paid digital game on the same day as Nintendo Switch 2. So please check it out if you're interested.
Paid? An instructional pamphlet, which, you know, instructional pamphlet's something you usually pick up for free on the way out of AAA after they inspect your car, you know, just a little bit of information on what's going on.
Including a button on the console's controller that also does technically cost money to activate isn't really a good move either, in my opinion.
Watching Scootish's stream and he said it and it made me think about it. The C button is for the chat app, but the chat app costs money. It's free initially, if you press the button and you can get into a chat with friends, it's free initially until like March next year, but then after that, you have to pay.
I also heavily agree with his opinion here on Mario Kart World, especially given the fact this was before the game even came out, and in retrospect, after having played the game for a bit, since it came bundled with my Switch 2, I have to say, I don't think it's worth $80 at all. I think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a far better Mario Kart game than Mario Kart World. The fact this is one of the only Mario Kart games where you have to unlock Donkey Kong instead of having him as a starter character, which most other Mario Kart games do, I think alone speaks volumes to the amount of lackluster quality in this game. My best Monkey Boy deserves better than this. But all joking aside, even outside of that, the overworld is really empty and incredibly lifeless and not really that interesting at all. And I don't really think Nintendo lived up to a very immersive open world Mario Kart game, which they were trying to advertise initially when this was announced. The game just feels so empty, and it definitely is not worth $80. So these initial criticisms of Nintendo's business practices I actually do agree with, but for some reason something very interesting happened around the Switch's launch. When the Switch 2 officially came out, BeatEmups for some reason mysteriously seemed to change his tune. He ended up right away buying every single Switch 2 accessory and every single Switch 2 launch game as well. Now, obviously, right away, you could write this off saying, yeah, he's a Nintendo YouTuber, of course he's gonna buy the Switch 2 console and games. And maybe every single accessory as well, although admittedly that seems a bit excessive. But then, if you're just gonna go ahead and do that anyway, why make a video acting like you care about the Switch 2's pricing and complaining about that, and try to act like you're trying to create a nuanced conversation about it when you're just gonna go ahead and buy all the accessories and the games at launch? It really makes your audience question just how much value your word held to begin with, and also makes them realize you didn't actually care that much about the pricing to begin with. I also do want to point out one extra thing about his launch game video that I think is pretty egregious in particular. For those who probably remember, one of the launch titles for the Switch 2, and funny enough, also one of the more affordable ones, was Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remaster, which was an HD port of the classic 3DS game. This is pretty much widely considered to be one of the greatest JRPGs of all time, and easily one of the best of the 21st century. So naturally, a lot of people were hyped to be able to play it on a new platform, and also with new enhanced graphics as well. But for some reason, despite the fact BeatEmups tries to pass off this video like he's gonna review every single Switch 2 launch game, he actually admits he doesn't even have Bravely Default on hand to review, and is just gonna go off of other reviews when discussing it here in this video.
There is actually one game missing from my physical collection, and while I have ordered it from GameStop, Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD doesn't arrive until the weekend, and I wanted to film this video already. So this is the one game I personally haven't tried yet, but I will have tried it before this video comes out, and if anything I say is off base, I'll make an edit. I'm just gonna go by what I've seen online and what other people are saying about this one.
Like, at the very least, try to wait a bit until you actually get the game so you can do a real review of it. It doesn't make any sense to play this up like you're gonna talk about every single Switch 2 game and review them when you're not actually gonna do that. You straight up admit you don't even have one of the key launch titles and lack the ability to review it, but put out this video anyway, which kind of damages your credibility as a reviewer. I think another pretty notable red flag from BeatEmups around this time was him completely flipping on his take on Mario Kart World, despite the fact he called it too expensive earlier.
Is it worth $80? Worth it just because it's a really fun Nintendo game and it's the launch title and you're gonna want to play it with your friends.
Oh, come on!
This kind of flip-flopping between takes became unfortunately very prevalent going forward on BeatEmups' channel, and it still continues to this day, as you can see with two of his most recent videos. Just when you think he's setting up a spot for actual discourse surrounding Nintendo, he'll immediately go back on that and act like everything's perfectly fine and there's nothing wrong with Nintendo at all. It is completely spineless, and unfortunately all these Nintendo shills seem to do that. Nintendo Prime, Switch Force, and plenty of others also adopt this exact kind of method of video making, unfortunately not really offering Nintendo any actual criticism, but simply making almost daily videos just about the company and usually bolstering it up in the most shallow way. Obviously, I have no real problem with these people as people. They all seem relatively nice and generally pretty chill too. My only problem is that a lot of their commentary just comes off as very shallow and not really any kind of actual nuance, fair, all-around criticism of Nintendo as a company. If you want to be a real critic, you have to look at things with more nuance. By definition, not everything is always automatically good all the time. Sometimes maybe a good situation has a bit of a bad twist to it, or maybe a bad situation has a good twist to it. But when your content is just saying everything is always good, that's not real criticism. There admittedly also is the other end of that too, which is just as much of a problem, which we'll get into shortly. The last thing I do think is worth bringing up about BeatEmups specifically though, before I end off this section, is that it's probably worth bringing up his big social experiment controversy from a few months ago. Essentially, what happened during this experiment is that BeatEmups planted what he called a fake seed for a leak about a Nintendo Direct happening in July back on a podcast that he did in June. Now, BeatEmups is not really known for having insider information at all and not really dropping leaks at all in any of his content. As he himself claims, dropping this fake leak during a podcast was actually part of his goal for a social experiment he was doing, supposedly. In his words specifically, he wanted to do content in the vein of somebody like Danny Gonzalez or Eddie Burback, and plant this false idea of a leak out there to see just how much the media would run with it and how much of a confirmation bias there would be so he could do a social experiment on that. The problem was, of course, since BeatEmups is the biggest YouTuber that covers almost exclusively Nintendo hardware and software, pretty much every social media outlet took this rumor and it spread all over the internet. So inevitably, because of this, when BeatEmups actually did reveal he had just faked the thing the whole time for a social experiment, most people just looked at it face value and saw that, yeah, he lied, which he did, and he does admit that to be fair. But obviously the fact he admitted it does not change the fact he did it, and also the way he explained it in his video came off as very hand-wavy, with him attempting to explain the psychology behind confirmation bias, but also not really understanding this himself. There's a very good video here from the Artsy Gamer where she goes over all the different flaws in Wood's presentation of the psychology that I definitely recommend you check out. In general though, Nintendo shills represent one end of the problem when it comes to there being any sort of real criticism of Nintendo out there. Rather than actually looking at the company as a whole with any nuance, they seem to be only interested in discussing good news. And they seem unwilling to discuss both the bad and the good of various situations involving Nintendo. But on the other side of this, we have the opposite end of the problem, that being the Nintendo Grifters. The Nintendo Grifters actually are the more prevalent group out there currently, and definitely the more obnoxious one as well. As you can probably imagine, they represent the exact opposite kind of issue that the Nintendo shills do. Whereas the Nintendo shills' main priority is only focusing on good news, and even when they do bring up bad news, they'll automatically backpedal on that by bringing up good news and acting like everything is okay. The Grifters, of course, only care about bad news and capitalizing off of that hate. They will sometimes put out almost daily videos providing the most shallow, lackluster takes, just crapping on Nintendo. And there are absolutely things to call out Nintendo for, but for some reason, none of these channels actually seem to be aware of what the real issues are, and also don't approach anything with any real nuance whatsoever. Perhaps one of the most notable Nintendo grifters is none other than Lord Frogmire, who just so happens to be the brother of Synthetic Man, who I've actually covered here before on the channel. Synthetic Man himself is already a very notorious presence in the gaming space overall on YouTube, given, well, literally everything about him.
This is complete embarrassing slop. I don't care if he worked as a social worker once upon a time and witnessed a lot of abusive fathers who beat their wives and their children. This story is encouraging Japanese people not to get married or to have kids.
Are you fucking dumb?
So, with somebody as charming of a personality as that, you can just imagine how delightful his brother probably is. And you guessed it, Lord Frogmire's content is essentially just all the same anti-woke rage bait content that his brother makes, just simply about Nintendo games instead of gaming overall. And once again, while there are absolutely things you can criticize Nintendo for, Lord Frogmire unfortunately seems incapable of doing that or offering any real criticism about the company or its games whatsoever. I think actually a very good example of this is his video where he talks about how he thinks Breath of the Wild ruined Nintendo and the Switch too. Let's see what he had to say.
It's about pattern recognition. It's noticing that Nintendo has been walking down a path, starting with Breath of the Wild, that has slowly eroded the last positive quality Nintendo has left, which is good, innovative games. Innovation which they have given up on so that they can better emulate Breath of the Wild. Mario Kart needs an open world. Metroid Prime 4 has a giant open empty desert, not because it's a new innovative direction for the series, but because it makes the games more similar to Breath of the Wild, the best-selling Zelda game of all time.
Now, while Breath of the Wild undeniably was a very influential game and also a huge turning point for the Zelda series and just a big deal for Nintendo overall, it doesn't really make any sense to blame Breath of the Wild for the shortcomings of Mario Kart World and Metroid Prime 4. Sure, all three games do have open worlds in them, but open world games have existed for a long time, even before Breath of the Wild. With Mario Kart World, open world racing games have also existed for a pretty long time at this point too, especially looking at things like the Forza Horizon series. So it doesn't really make any sense at all to claim that Zelda Breath of the Wild is the reason why Metroid Prime 4 and Mario Kart World have open worlds.
And it's not close. 34 million copies. And if that doesn't sound like a lot, Skyward Sword, the Zelda game for the Wii, one of the most popular consoles of all time, sold less than 8 million copies. To call Breath of the Wild a success is an understatement. It's the kind of success that a developer may think, wow, we made a really great game here, but corporate looks at it and says, why are we making these games that don't sell well when we could just make more Breath of the Wilds?
Wait, what? What do you mean games that haven't sold well? Nintendo has produced plenty of games that have sold very well even since the release of Breath of the Wild that aren't even open world at all. Luigi's Mansion 3 is not an open world game, but that sold over 14 million copies. Mario Odyssey, which is more of a 3D sandbox game than a traditional open world game, sold over 30 million copies. Animal Crossing New Horizons sold over 49 million copies. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate sold over 37 million copies. And funny enough, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is a traditional Mario Kart game that doesn't have an open world in it, sold over 70 million copies. For some reason, Lord Frogmire seems to think that Nintendo including an open world in their game is a method to drive sales, when really that's pretty clearly not the case at all, since many of their successful games don't even have an open world in it. Nintendo is pretty clearly not just introducing open worlds into their games to try to drive sales, so it doesn't really make any sense at all for him to claim this. Especially with Mario Kart, given the fact the last Mario Kart game became easily the best-selling game on the Nintendo Switch without an open world in sight. Again, that pretty clearly isn't Nintendo's mindset here, given the fact they still produce games that sell tens of millions of copies that don't have an open world in them at all. Like I just said previously, most of the best-selling games on the Nintendo Switch don't even have an open world in them. This pretty clearly isn't Nintendo's strategy at all, but for some reason Lord Frogmire seems to think it is. But given the fact his brother is this guy, I can't say I'm too surprised at all.
That is easier to emulate than it is to innovate. To just copy what they already did and bring that success to every other Nintendo franchise. The problem is, Breath of the Wild is not good because it's the greatest game ever made. It didn't sell a bajillion copies because it has the best world design, or the best mechanics, or the best combat. It was great because it was something new and interesting. The exploring Hyrule had never felt like this before. But Nintendo does not agree with me. That is not why they think the game succeeded. Their actions have made it clear that they think Breath of the Wild succeeded because open world games appeal to the wider audience, and they have perfected the open world on their first try. And this belief has already ruined multiple Zelda games and will ruin the entire Switch 2's library if they continue down this path.
What exactly do you mean by ruin the franchise? If you mean that every Zelda game is like Breath of the Wild that came out afterward, that's technically not true. Both the Link's Awakening remake and also Zelda Echoes of Wisdom are more in line with classic Zelda than the Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild open world style. Trying to make the insinuation that every single Zelda game that came after Breath of the Wild is just like that, or that Breath of the Wild somehow ruined the other Zelda games, doesn't really make any sense either. In general, most of Lord Frogmire's content is exactly like this, often taking an overly negative slant at something Nintendo related. But instead of offering any real criticism about the company or its games, he instead just provides a bunch of pointless nitpicks that are often overly negative and sometimes don't even make any sense, like I just pointed out here. Him attempting to make the claim that Breath of the Wild ruined Nintendo and that Nintendo is trying to make every single one of its franchises open world for sales is something that is so easily debunkable it's absurd. Lord Frogmire is really just as bad and easily felted as his brother. Another person that's pretty prevalent in the Nintendo grifter space that's definitely worth calling out is also real-life Fake Wizard. This guy is one that I've actually personally avoided covering on the channel for quite a bit now, since he's honestly one of the biggest rage baiters in the online Discourse space in general. Most of his videos are him making very intentionally insane claims, like trying to claim Pixar's Hopper was a Disney movie meant to indoctrinate kids. Or him also trying to make the claim that video games are not made for men anymore. Wow, trying to keep up the Gamergate 2.0 grift, I see. This guy's pretty blatantly shallow and also makes a ton of these very clickbaity, inflammatory videos that don't offer a lot of substance or real critique whatsoever. And he obviously is very aware of this and likely doesn't actually believe most of the stuff he says. He just says it because it gets clicks and easy attention, which of course is essentially the textbook definition of a grifter. It's also very funny because I've ratioed him on Twitter before for him apparently thinking I'm a Disney shill, despite the fact one of my highest viewed videos is me criticizing Disney's live action Lilo and Stitch for being a shallow retreading of the original that directly went against the message of the original film as well. Ah yes, clearly I'm a Disney shill ready to gulp up any slop the company puts out. I think the interesting thing about Wizard's discussions of Nintendo though is how he'll often intentionally try to utilize Nintendo as a brand in some of its games to meet his own political ideology, or in some cases just intentionally try to gatekeep people he doesn't like from fandoms he's a part of. A good example of this actually is his video called Video Games Are Not For Men Anymore, where he does bring up Zelda Echoes of Wisdom and also Animal Crossing New Horizons. He does bring up a lot of other games too, since this entire video is essentially him trying to gatekeep women from gaming overall. Oh boy, let's see what he had to say.
Hello, I'm the real-life fake wizard. A research and consulting firm called Ampere Analysis just presented a study claiming that female players are, quote, an overlooked opportunity for growth in the gaming industry. Their senior analyst, Katie Holt, stood up at a conference and told a room full of executives that women make up 48% of all gamers, that the industry is leaving money on the table, and that studios should be developing new types of content, including romance, lifestyle, cooking, travel, and fashion-themed games paired with puzzle and simulation games in order to attract women who do not currently play any video games at all.
Okay, first of all, I love that he pulls in Endymion and shows this person's full name and face, and also intentionally says, Katie stood up in a conference room full of executives and told them that 48% of gamers are women. While it's not as on the nose as Endymion, it's pretty obvious he's taking the same tactics, putting up this woman's face and name, and specifically listing her as the person who made this statement, which obviously Wizard seems to have a very particular problem with.
Please do not harass or attack any of these people that I present. I am simply showing you evidence to strengthen the case of what I've been told. And if I mispronounce anyone's names, my bad, but firstly we have Jen Lee Lukin, a video game producer at Sucker Punch, as you can see on screen right now.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
I always love when these guys will say things like, oh, don't harass these female game developers I'm talking about, but then proceed to show their full names, social media handles, and their faces right there on screen. Incredible. In addition to this, the way he words this is inevitably very intentionally disingenuous. The article that he's reading here doesn't actually say that studios should be trying to appeal directly towards women that don't play video games. Rather, the article is just showing the existing metrics of women that play games, the kinds of games they like, and also how to bring in a potentially untapped market of women who don't play video games and get them interested in games overall. The article quite literally is not demanding that studios should be appealing to women who don't play video games. This obviously is very telling and intentional wording on Wizard's part.
Now, if you were sitting there thinking, gee, attracting females that don't play games at all, well, that sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? You're right. This is not exactly new. We've heard the data from different consulting firms, different analysts, different conferences for the better part of the last decade, maybe even more. We need more women in gaming. Women are underrepresented. Women make up half of the gaming populace now. And all of those claims are coming from people who are not giving you the full picture, and they're coming from a place of bias and prerogative.
Gee, that sure is a bold claim coming from the guy who made 3 different videos with thumbnails blatantly shilling for Charlie Kirk of all people, complained that the live-action One Piece was quote-unquote pushing something onto its audience.
If anyone is going to change the story, I'd rather have it be the dude who made the story than a boardroom of idiot executives pushing something onto audiences, you know?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Has claimed the upcoming Masters of the Universe movie will bomb before the movie has even come out, and also try to act like Ghost of Yote didn't sell well when, yes, in fact, the game did sell well. Clearly, the only biased one here is real-life fake Wizard.
Every single time a studio has taken those claims seriously, the results have been catastrophic. Not for the consulting firm, of course. They got paid and they get to sail into the sunset to spread more divisive rhetoric.
Inevitably, Wizard is going back to the old Sweet Baby Inc. type conspiracy theory. The truth is, consulting firms don't actually have anything directly to do with a game's development. The development of characters and stories for a video game still falls upon the game studio itself. Consulting firms like Sweet Baby Inc., for instance, really only exist to give feedback and don't actually have any direct involvement in the games themselves. If Wizard was actually knowledgeable about the gaming industry, he'd probably know this, but obviously he pretty clearly doesn't.
But for the studios, the developers, and the actual paying customers, they'll watch franchises get dismantled in pursuit of an audience that doesn't exist. The data reported by Ampere Analysis is troubling. There is evidence of sexism for both men and women in this data, and should any executive take this information seriously, it paints a picture where there will be even fewer new video games that are made for men.
Okay, two major things wrong there with Wizard's statement. Wizard attempts to claim that there is sexism for both women and men in this data when really it doesn't look like that's happening at all. The data is just observing what video games tend to be played by women more, such as Animal Crossing, The Sims 4, and Roblox, which are all documented to have more female players than male ones, and determining how they can appeal to more women to get them interested in the hobby as well and be able to market to them further. This is literally just a demographic study. There's nothing sexist about this. It's also ironic because right after saying this, Wizard shows us his own sexism by talking about games made for men. Now, while there are plenty of video games out there that are at least likely targeted towards a male audience, just like any facet of the entertainment industry, games are not just made exclusively for men. Games can easily be enjoyed by both men and women, regardless of who the primary demographic might be. And games have been enjoyed by both men and women ever since the industry started to begin with. So already, Wizard is inevitably already showing us the errors in his thinking by talking about games exclusively made for men. But given everything else I've already pointed out to you about this guy's content, I imagine you probably can't expect much better from Great Value Gandalf here.
It sounds like near parity, doesn't it? It sounds like men and women play games in almost equal numbers. Well, let me tell you what the number actually means. That 48% includes everyone. Every single person who plays anything on any device. Your aunt playing Candy Crush on her iPad while watching Jeopardy? She's in that number. Your mom playing Royal Match on her phone during her lunch break? She's in that number. Is someone who downloaded Wordle once in 2022 and forgot about it? They're probably in that number. These are counted the same as someone who put 2,000 hours into Elden Ring or plays Highguard every single night after work.
Well, oh mighty mock-up mage, since you seem so confident in that claim, why don't you tell us how exactly you came across that? I love how he makes the pretty big claim that people that don't normally play video games, or people that largely play mobile games and only on occasion, are also included in the study, but he doesn't show any evidence at all of this. He just expects his audience to believe it right away, which, to be fair, knowing them, they probably would. It's a good thing I'm here then to smoke out the bullcrap from our favorite bearded bozo.
When respondents were given a list of 52 console and PC games, only 3 games had more female players than male. Animal Crossing, The Sims 4, and Roblox. That's it! On mobile, 13 out of 50 games skewed female. So the data is actually telling you that women are overwhelmingly concentrated in mobile and casual gaming, which is a market that already exists alive and well and is already being served by thousands of games and billions of dollars in revenue.
Funny enough, this actually is disproven by what is said later in the article. Later on in the article, Holt discusses how women often are playing online games but just aren't using voice chat due to toxicity. This can, at times, lead to the inaccurate misconception that women aren't playing these kinds of games, which is exactly why it wasn't included in the above study. Funny that Wizard pretty conveniently left that part of the article out of his video here.
I've talked about things like this before on this channel. These analytics firms lump mobile gaming in with console and PC and then act shocked when the demographics look different than what publishers see in their actual sales data. Female Candy Crush players who spend their afternoons going to brunch with the gals and then go home and watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians are not in the same bucket as the sweaty pro gamer who's been playing World of Warcraft for 19 years.
Ah yes, and clearly you're not the sexist one here, right, Wizard? Clearly all female gamers are going to brunch with the gals and watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Clearly you're not assigning narrowly specific stereotypes to one sex whatsoever.
And then we get to the genre recommendations. little condescending with this one.
Ah yes, and clearly you weren't being condescending at all by talking about keeping up with the Kardashians and taking the gals to brunch. The absolute hypocrisy is unreal here. Overall, it's pretty clear Wizard only made this video because he wants to, for some reason, gatekeep women that could possibly be interested in gaming from getting into the hobby whatsoever. His form of grifting involving Nintendo is definitely a little different than the others we've discussed here, since he was more interested in bringing up a game like Animal Crossing New Horizons, and acting like because it was one of the only console games listed in the study where women outnumber male players, clearly it means that studios shouldn't be looking to get more women into gaming, even though that really makes no sense whatsoever. And even outside of Lord Frogmire and the Sham Sorcerer, there are so many other Nintendo grifters out there currently, given the fact it's a very lucrative thing to grift off right now. And yes, both Lord Frogmire and Real Life Fake Wizard do fit the definition of grifter, especially in the videos I just showed. Both of them do present a false quote-unquote issue or problem, since in Lord Frogmire's case, he tries to make the claim that Breath of the Wild ruined Nintendo, and now Nintendo is putting a bunch of open world elements in its games to chase sales. Even though, as I showed earlier, that claim makes absolutely no sense. And also, as we saw earlier, Real Life Fake Wizard tried to make the claim that a random study that just so happened to feature Animal Crossing in it and detailing that more female players than male players play that game was completely sexist and also contributing to men not getting games made for them. Even though, like I also showed earlier, this doesn't really make any sense at all either. Both of these people created a false problem and also a false solution to go with it in the hopes of selling this to their audience, which of course is the definition of grifting. If you want to know more about how grifters are generally defined, I recommend checking out this video from Anthony Grumuglia that goes in pretty good detail about it. And in terms of Nintendo grifters specifically, there are definitely a lot of them out there, unfortunately. Funny enough, there actually was a video done recently solely on Nintendo grifters from the channel Nintendeen that I actually recommend checking out, since it's very well done, very well edited, and it does a relatively good job going over different Nintendo grifters and also names more than I really care to look at for this video. And also, unfortunately for Nintendeen, his video also got brigaded by the exact kind of people he was talking about, so definitely go subscribe to him. His content is generally pretty professional, very well put together, and also has really good editing too, so definitely go check him out. However, the one criticism I would actually have of this video specifically is that I think he goes way too soft on Nintendeen. Now, for those who may not know, along with Lord Frogmire, Nintendeen is probably the most notorious Nintendo grifter. His channel originally, funny enough, was full of retrospective content for various Nintendo games. He did retrospectives on things like the Mario Party games, the Donkey Kong Country games, some Sonic games, all the 3D Marios, and plenty more. But around the time of the Switch 2 reveal, he ended up doing a video called I'm Not Buying the Switch 2. And this video ended up doing very well, to the point that all of Nintendeen's content going forward would be hate content about Nintendo. Right away, even just doing a quick scroll through his channel, you can see that a lot of these are just grasping at straws sometimes, or just trying to find some kind of topic to hate on Nintendo with. And like I said before, Nintendo absolutely deserves criticism for the things they do. But when you are making almost daily content just hating on Nintendo and highlighting negative things with them with almost no nuance whatsoever, and especially given your content used to be Nintendo retrospective videos, people are likely to question your credibility and where exactly you're getting your sources on these different hate stories. Or really why you're making them to begin with. Now, to give Nintendeen credit, he has actually been on a bit of a YouTube break, and he actually did put up a poll recently on his channel asking if he should bring retrospectives back. Given the fact he made a lot of retrospectives in the past, I would actually be curious to see this myself, since it does seem like something he's very passionate about. But definitely the big quick turnaround that you can see from him making retrospectives to Nintendo hate content does technically label him as a grifter just because of that. Unfortunately, with how things currently are, I think both the grifters and the shills represent two extremes that have almost completely made Nintendo criticism that's actually fair and nuanced go extinct. It's like I'm stuck between Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and neither of them are giving me any real criticism about Nintendo, and instead are just overly glazing it or overly hating on it. I feel like, especially in recent years, this has been a big problem when it comes to Nintendo Discourse on YouTube. If you really want to give fair criticism of Nintendo, you must look at the good and the bad and really go over all of that in detail. Now, I do want to list a few creators here that I think actually do a good job with this sort of thing and actually give fair criticism to Nintendo in my opinion. I think one of the biggest channels that also does do the best at this as well is none other than Arlo. I think Arlo actually has been consistently pretty good at looking at both the good and the bad with Nintendo. He won't just lean into one extreme and be a shill overly glazing the company, or lean into the other extreme overly hating on it either. He actually does look fairly at every facet of every situation with Nintendo he covers, and that's something I really appreciate about him. In general, I feel like it's very hard to find actual fair critics when it comes to Nintendo like Arlo in this day and age. There is just so much on either end of the extreme, and it really frustrates me personally, given the fact I think Nintendo absolutely is a company that could use some fair criticism. But when you just have two extreme sides of it, you can't really get any real criticism out of that. I do hope in the future that we'll see more real criticism of Nintendo in general, but I guess only time will tell. I do think me doing the Hunting Griffly Bears videos, however, has helped a lot more people understand how to spot a grift and also ultimately what real media criticism looks like. That's really why I started doing this series to begin with, and I'm hoping with it we can bring YouTube back to a spot where more legitimate criticism exists. Or at the very least, more people can find a way to seek out real criticism. So as long as y'all keep enjoying these videos and hopefully learning something from them, I'm happy to keep hunting Griffly Bears. But what do you think? Am I wrong? Am I a gay woke furry? Let me know in the comments below. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video or learned something new from it. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a like and also consider subscribing as well. I do lots of videos like this overall, often talking about film, animation, gaming, and things like that, so if you liked this video, you'll probably like the other videos I have planned as well. I am currently working on a much bigger video talking about Jello Apocalypse and why I personally think he damaged a lot of the media criticism space on YouTube as well. And I've also got some more videos about autism representation and also film in the works too. If you'd like to hang out with like-minded film and animation fans, feel free to join my Discord as well. It's linked down in the description. Special thanks to my patrons and YouTube members who make this content possible. I appreciate y'all a ton. And I appreciate all of you for making it to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it or learned something new from it. But for now, I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye!